Welcome back. You're watching Today. And more than 20 pro-Palestinian protesters carrying flags and signs have been arrested by police at Sydney's Port Botany. Hundreds gathered at the port in protest against an Israeli-owned shipping company, Zim. Joining us to discuss is National's Deputy Leader, Perin Davey, and Nine Melbourne reporter, Heidi Murphy. Good to see you both. Perin, I'll start with you. Now, police say this was an unauthorised protest. Should there be more laws in place, do you think, when it comes to rallying?
Oh, look, I think the laws we've got in place are adequate, but what I do think is that they need to be enforced, which in this case they were, and people need to respect those laws. Everyone respects people's right for peaceful protest, but let's call out this protest for what it was. It was anti-Semitic against an Israeli company that wanted to stop trade. We need to call this out. People who are saying that we should boycott pro-Israel businesses, what they're really saying is we need to boycott Jewish businesses, and that's anti-Semitic, and we need to call it out from the get-go.
Yeah, some strong words from you there, Perin. I mean, Heidi, most of the protests we've seen so far have been peaceful. This one took a different turn, and some of the protesters were then accusing the police of being heavy-handed. They're stuck in a tricky position, aren't they, the cops?
Well, they really are. I mean, port access is something that is necessary to keep cities moving, to keep freight moving, to keep industry moving. Blockading a port, blockading a ship in particular, obstructs all of that. Police are in a difficult situation. They'll need to move in, they'll need to clear the way because that's their role. They'll need to clear the way for things to get through, but any time they go near a protester, they will be accused of some heavy-handed tactics. I do feel for them here.
Yeah, it is really tricky. I mean, it seems these calls to cool the temperature are really not being listened to. There are also talks of planned protests in Melbourne schools, which could see thousands of students walk out of classrooms. I mean, Perin, the Victorian Jewish community is now demanding the state government in Victoria crack down on these school strikes, but it seems there's nothing they can do to stop them.
Well, I think it's absolutely devastating that people are using school students for their own means, and I feel for the Jewish community. What about all the Jewish students who will be going to school at the same time and seeing this on their television screens, seeing their own peers, their own age group out there waving flags against what is their faith? We live in Australia, we are a multicultural society, and I think we all need to be able to go about our days feeling safe and secure and welcome in our nation, be you Palestinian or of Jewish faith. And I think it's absolutely despicable that people are trying to encourage school students to walk out of the classroom to pick a side.
I mean, there's talk about whether they're being encouraged or whether this is of their own volition. I guess what we're hearing from the Victorian State Premier, for example, Heidi, is that everyone has a right to protest. It's similar to what we've seen in the US and the UK with some of the students there. But why not take these protests or this activism to the weekend? I mean, they really want to make a point by doing it during school hours, don't they?
Yeah, they certainly want to make a point by doing it during school hours, and I think they would take issue with the idea that they are being used. They would genuinely feel some passion to protest in this way. There was some climate protests involving students last week. Again, it's something they feel very passionately about. Yes, some of these students feel very passionately about the subject and will want to take to the streets on a school day. And I mean, what are the school options? I understand what the Jewish community is trying to achieve with its petition to the state to denounce the protest and to keep the kids in school. We can't lock the gates, lock the school doors, keep them in there. It's going to happen.
How do you
just keep it peaceful?
Yeah, how do you anticipate it playing out, Heidi? I mean, we've seen so many of those protests on the streets in Melbourne. It's being called the protest capital of the country, particularly when it came to sort of more climate change focused protests. But this is a little bit different. This does seem a little bit more, I guess, political in a sense.
It is political. I would hope it is kept peaceful. There will be a strong police presence. There will, I assume, be some adults involved with the students as well. Protests can happen peacefully. They are unpalatable to different sections of the community, and I can understand that. But look, I think it'll play out fairly peacefully on Thursday.
Yeah, let's see how it plays out. All right, just very quickly on some other news from the RBA Governor, Michelle Bullock. She seemed a little bit bullish yesterday when she gave her speech in Melbourne. I mean, it seems as though, Perin, she's sort of concerned about wage growth and whether that's matching productivity.
Absolutely, and this is this is a red flag that has been around for a while and that the government keeps ignoring. I mean, we welcome real wage growth, but what we're actually seeing is wages going up, inflation going up, productivity going down, and that is just putting the pressure on the RBA more and more. What we need to do is start to address the productivity issue to ensure that we remain competitive and that we can afford the growth in wages that we're seeing.
Yeah, Heidi, at the end of the day, it's sort of the younger demographic, isn't it? Those younger mortgage holders that are really copping it here when it comes to these rate rises.
It really is. As much as Jim Chalmers might say, let's celebrate those wage rises for those hard-working Australians, and I agree. I feel as though that leading directly to another interest rate rise is not news anybody wants to hear. It's the hard-working Australians that are being hit the hardest by these continual Reserve Bank rises. There have to be other levers to start pulling.
That's the tricky part. I mean, what do you think it is? You know, Perin's saying that the government may need to do more, hiding on the streets. Is that what it's all about? I mean, people are struggling. They need a wage rise, don't they, to combat?
Well, exactly, and the payback for that should not be having to pay suddenly a lot more in interest rates every month. It's hurting a lot.
And you get those text messages, right? Your rates going up this month, this month. It's hard to keep track on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for joining us this morning. Appreciate it. We'll catch up again soon. Carlos.
In our next half.